I'm standing here in this place where I stand every Sunday as I come to approach the congregation and to speak on the lessons for the appointed for the day. And I'm very mindful as I stand here in St. Philip Church that of the profound absence of your physical presence in this building at this time. As I was biking up here this morning to come into the church, I was passed by several buses going up to Camosun College campus and to the UVic campus, and all of them were completely empty. I passed bus stops. There was not a person standing at the bus stop. The traffic on the roads was very thin, very unlike the usual hustle and bustle that's taking place when I come into the church on most weekday mornings. There's a very strange sense of absence that's permeating a great deal of our community and indeed of the world right now. We're all so conscious of the many, many things we've been caused to have to let go of over these last few weeks and days, and it's going to go on for some time. Such a sense of loss in not being able to do things that in which we used to find enjoyment, pleasure, comfort, encouragement, and nurture. Being conscious of not being able to go to concerts, not being able to go out to large gatherings or even modest gatherings in coffee shops and restaurants. And there's such a sense that I have here, standing here, that of that kind of loss, of that feeling of something that is profoundly missing in this place. But it's really important, I think, at this time, as we have that sense in the material realm of lacking things that we've always loved and found encouragement and nurture in, it's really important that we keep in mind that Christianity is foundationally and fundamentally undergirded and supported by an incarnational theology. An incarnational theology tells us that an awareness of God's presence and action in life is mediated to us through physical, tangible things, through the beauty of these stained glass windows that you can't see right at the moment, through the presence of another person, through hearing voices raised together in beautiful music, hearing voices raised together in prayer, through hearing our sacred texts read, hearing with our ears, hearing those sacred texts read by a person from the lectern. Somehow all of those things, that the physical touch of another person that is forbidden to us at this time, seeing people, seeing children running up and down the aisle, all those things are physical, tangible means by which we are helped to open our hearts more deeply to an awareness of that presence we believe, the mystery and beauty of that presence we believe that permeates all of existence. But the important thing is not actually the things themselves. This building does not exist for itself. It exists to be a sign, to be a reminder, to be an instrument that helps us open our hearts more deeply and profoundly to an awareness of our connection to one another, our connection to the whole human community, our connection ultimately to that divine, mysterious presence that permeates all of existence. We are connected to God. And it's that reality, it's knowing that reality, it's being conscious of that reality for which our hearts most deeply long. I've been really touched over the last few hours of this morning and last night as I've listened to all the horrifying stories of disconnection and pain and suffering that people are experiencing in this troubled time. I've been so touched by a couple of verses from near the end of Matthew's Gospel. Jesus is just about to die on the cross. And Matthew says in chapter 27, verse 50, and Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And then Matthew adds this one curious little detail, and it's hard, I don't know that anybody can exactly describe what this was like or what this means or how you would have perceived this had you been there, but he adds this one curious detail in verse 51. And behold, he says, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Jesus came in order that we might know that there are no barriers. There is no separation. We are all connected. We are all connected to God. We are all deeply and profoundly connected to one another. I know you've all heard me say it so many times, but it just bears repeating that if your heart is beating, if the blood is coursing through the veins in your body, if your lungs are expanding and contracting and the air is coming in and going out, then the Spirit of God dwells in you. That is the Spirit of God, that life force, that energy field, and that cannot be defeated, it cannot be undone, it cannot be removed from our lives as long as we are these living beings. It's curious that all of this is taking place in the season in the church year that we call Lent. Because Lent is the time of the year where we are especially encouraged to try to practice that discipline that Jesus practiced at the very end of his life. Matthew says Jesus yielded up his spirit. Nobody took Jesus' life from him. Jesus gave his life. He surrendered his life. He gave it up for the well-being of others. He gave it up for the life, for the nurture and the sustenance of the world, of us, of our lives. And it's when we follow that pattern and, along with Jesus, yield to the reality of the circumstances in which we find ourselves. It's then that the curtain in the temple is torn, and we know in our hearts that there is no separation, that we are all deeply and profoundly connected. But it's important in this time that while we hold in our hearts that awareness of connection, it's also important that we find ways, new ways, to give incarnation to that reality. And so whatever it looks like, it's not going to look like gathering in worship for some time. It's not going to look like being able to go to a hockey game. It's not going to look like being able to have a big dinner party in our house. So perhaps it will look like sending an email to someone we know is on their own. Perhaps it will look like taking one person and going out for a walk with them. Perhaps it will look like making a phone call to someone who may be lonely. Perhaps it will look like just sitting quietly in our own home and holding in our hearts those people we know and love and care for, and praying for their well-being, praying for the sustenance of their spirit and their hearts in this difficult and troubling time. There's a poem that I was actually sent this morning, which I think just beautifully and powerfully gives voice to something we really need to what we really need to hear at this time. It's by a poet named Lynn Ungar. It's called Pandemic. Lynn Ungar writes, "What if you thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel. Cease from buying and selling. Give up, just for now, on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, Touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has come clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. That's the challenge of this time, that in the midst of loss, in the midst of absence, in the midst of what may seem like often like darkness and chaos, in the midst of all of those things, there is light, there is beauty, there is truth, there is goodness, and there is a profound and deep possibility for us to gain deeper access to that inner reality of our true nature, that inner reality that knows that there is a strength that is possible to us, that doesn't depend on things going smoothly, that doesn't need to be overwhelmed when things are strange and difficult and so awkward and confusing. There is a deeper wisdom and truth that dwells in every human heart. And the challenge of this time is to access that, because that's the place within ourselves that puts us in touch with and connects us to the reality of compassion, the reality of our true nature, which is loving and good and kind, and which wants to extend gentleness to all of creation, and wants to live responsibly on this earth, and wants to know that there is no other to whom we can attribute blame for this curious situation we find ourselves in, and that holds all of the world in our hearts and trusts in the goodness and purity of God's presence at work in all of life. I long for the time when we'll be able to gather here again in this place to worship and raise our voices in praise to that goodness and beauty. But at this time, we are called to a different path. We're called to a path of quietness, a path of stillness, a path of incarnating in more subtle ways the reality of our connection. Those are things we can do. And in doing those things, we do, in fact, make a difference. And we bring transformation into this awkward and difficult world. And we bring a spirit of light and goodness that will be a ministry to all those we encounter and those we are not able to physically encounter at this time. We hold together in that one great spirit of love and compassion that is our true union. God bless you all. Be patient, stay faithful, and I look forward so much to the time when we will gather again and raise our hearts and voices in praise to God.